As I said yesterday, I'm from Massachusetts. I've been gone 20 years, but I'm a huge Red Sox fan. I read in Steve's book, he also dreamed of being a Red Sox growing up. So we've got that in common. And of course, for those of us who live in Portland, this whole beard idea is funny to us because, of course, it caught the nation's attention. It became this big media story about the Red Sox. It was fun as a way to describe, the sort of heart and grit of the team. But, I come from the beardiest city in the country. It doesn't matter if you're, biking your kids to school or, going to the grocery store. Everyone's got a beard, it would seem. So we thought it was quite funny about this, sort of a crazy beard story coming out of Boston. And I guess we're sort of another reason that Portland and Boston really sort of embrace the same culture and ideas. So it's really fun to be here. I think next year we will start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Clearly, people were out having a lot of fun last night. I'm glad I'm also going in front of Steve because we got he's a powerful speaker. He's got an amazing story, a very difficult story to tell. And then he's going to also tell us not just about his own upbringing, but how he's translated that and brings that to his work at Walgreens as the Chief Diversity Officer. And I think, we talked about at the end of the day yesterday, this notion of resilience, and then reading Steve's book and spending a little time with him this morning, clearly I think, his story of resiliency, is at the heart of the work that we're trying to do with EcoDistricts, this notion that our neighborhoods are fundamental places where we either succeed or we don't succeed. Antwi and others made that very clear yesterday, that you can determine someone's lifespan, their quality of life, and their station, ultimately often their station in life, how long they're going to live, what kind of success they're going to have in school and in life by the zip code they live in. And so it's so fundamental for all of us who are working in this green neighborhood space to recognize that's the challenge that we face and that's the things that we're doing. We're not just building the stuff of sustainability, we're helping build, rebuild, and connect our communities. And that's really important. And as Adam was talking about, I wanted Adam to come over from Sydney to Portland, and that's no easy pitch, as you can imagine. If you've ever been to Australia, it's a pretty glorious place. And of course, we brought him in the summer in Portland before the rains started hammering him and his family, and they're all sort of wondering, what the hell are we doing here? But this notion of doing damage, I guess that was a sort of a crass way of saying, as Adam mentioned, that we are at this cusp in which we can build something really powerful about EcoDistricts. And I want to talk about the word because, as I said yesterday, we're pivoting as an organization from being a Portland-based nonprofit founded by our former mayor to do good work in Portland to this national and internationally with a sort of a national organization that has ambition to help inform the international conversation about green and sustainable neighborhoods. And we picked the name EcoDistricts. Now, we picked that name for a variety of reasons. One, it was becoming synonymous with this movement. In one word, you just start to describe what we're talking about. Of course, it has its challenges like any brand. Are we exclusively an environmental movement? Are we sort of talking about green stuff exclusively? And of course, we don't think so. We think, and I think, as we sort of have laid out in this conference, that it's fundamentally about the people who live in these communities. It's about the leaders who are investing billions of dollars in our communities, like Mayor Menino, Daley, Rahm Emanuel, Michael Bloomberg, and others who are really, taking on the city and the city's sustainability agenda in a very serious, very business-forward way. But it's also, of course, the people who have been toiling in the neighborhoods, community justice activists, social justice folk, community development people, that fundamentally these agendas need to come together, right? That for this brand to work and for our movement to work, it has to be powerful, it has to embody and invite lots of people in. And the Boston Strong brand, if you will, or sort of effort that came out of the bombings in April. And I was here with a staff person during that week we were here preparing for this conference and looking at space. It was pretty powerful to be in the city for that week. It was both scary. It was also, isolating. We were sort of locked down. I was with my sister's boyfriend, this place in JP. But what came of it, and I think the sort of what's now become a tagline, Boston Strong, that we sort of saw emerge, and certainly through sports, the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Celtics, others, sort of embodying that in sort of mass culture. This is a really important brand. What's important and what's sort of powerful about Boston Strong is that, it could be coerced into something really jingoistic, but it's really about a community and how it feels about itself and how it connects to one another. And, another really interesting trend building off of, this notion of connectedness in this country, of course, is, this emergent and very rapidly diversifying country we live in. By 2042 or even sooner, we're going to be a 50% country of color. And you hear this sort of playing out in cities in this sustainability agenda, in which equity is really driving the agenda now, where perhaps it was climate exclusively or green building or other sort of efforts that were sort of defining sustainability just 10 years ago. Now it's really about community, it's really about equity, and it's not about an output of equity. Oh, that's something we want. It's fundamental to who we are. It's what the success, it's the key, or one of the key success factors of whether our communities are going to survive, be resilient, and ultimately sort of transition to a much more diverse world. And you hear it called the majority minority in Boston. That's one way it's being described in the neighborhoods, of really a new political day, of organizing new alliances that cross boundaries, labor, environmental activists, social neighborhood activists doing this work. And so it's a really interesting time. And I think for us who are in this room, who are some of the leaders, urban design leaders, community development leaders, city and municipal leaders, it's really our responsibility to create a strong brand around this and to be inclusive. And this room is certainly not diverse enough. This effort is just beginning, and it's our work, again, all of us in this room, to make sure we really address that, really pull people in. And again, it's about the way we describe this work. It's the way we do this work. I heard a lot of folks in the last 24 hours talk about how powerful that charrette we did, that workshop we did in Dorchester, in the Talbot Triangle area of Codman Square, because we got out in the community, and a lot of you contributed your time to that and got to meet the community and got to meet Dave and Gail and what they're doing in that community and how they're translating sustainability into their own context and into their own very diverse community and what it means. And that's really important, I think, for us also to recognize in this movement is, sustainability can mean a lot of things. And if you're doing a big development site like here in the Innovation District, 10 million square feet have just come online in the last 10 years, hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, this is really a real estate deal, right? This is an infrastructure deal happening in this neighborhood, but it could be so much more. Obviously, what will make this neighborhood successful is the kind of companies and people who live here. Is there affordable housing? How does it connect to South Boston? That's just adjacent to this district. How does it connect back into the central business district of Boston? Are there mechanisms so that there's good jobs and good opportunities, workforce opportunities for people to build out this neighborhood and to build new skills in the green economy? We heard, and we were at the Artists for Humanity space last night. That was a really cool space to hold a party, in essence. But to hear that that's the largest employer of teens in the city, building art skills, video, bike rack development, they're doing welding, they're doing fine arts in this neighborhood. I think that's part of that sustainability story that we need to make sure we weave into this work. Mentioned Neighborlands. So Neighborlands is this great organization founded by sort of their spiritual leader, Candy Chang, and some of you, who's seen Candy speak? She's great. We tried to get her this year. Hopefully we can get her next year. She's amazing because she's really helps to activate the spirit of community through simple acts of asking people what they want. And so in the spirit of Candy and what they're doing at Neighborland, we've partnered with them this week to ask some simple questions. Again, we're at the beginning of this movement, if you will, or this marketplace building, and so all of us are building this together. We're a small nonprofit, we're 6 people, we're $1 million. For us to have any effect and impact, we're all going to do this together, and it's going to be very inclusive. So we've been asking 2 questions. One is, I want blank in my eco-district. So what is it that you think is important? Is it stuff? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? What's the spirit and that sort of embodies that for the work? And then EcoDistricts is, or are, blank, blank, blank. And again, our organization's named EcoDistricts. Now, I think we're going to have a problem if we are thinking that, that's an eco-district and this is an eco-district, and we're going to sort of account for these sort of special neighborhoods, and we're going to go the kind of metrics-driven way with this effort. Our organization is, meant to sort of provoke this notion on a journey. Neighborhoods, cities are on an arc of development. They regress, they progress. We have to recognize this is a very dynamic space, and with your help this week, we really want you to help fill these stickers out and really sort of start to give some life to what we're doing, and that's going to help us as we go forward. I won't get into great detail because I think Alex and many folks covered this off yesterday. So the trends around the work we're doing, they're undeniable. So one, we've got a tremendous political leadership showing up at the local level. The federal government's a mess. Much of the funding to do this work is going to come through creative public-private partnerships, bringing private capital. I think we'll hear a bit from Steve about how the private sector puts shoulder to the wheel in helping revitalize and create more resilient communities. But it's also going to come from really strong political and local leadership, and we're seeing that. We've seen a decade now of this sustainability agenda being driven, as I mentioned, by very powerful and smart mayors who that 15 years ago, this was boutique. I come from Portland. We were always considered a sustainability leader, and it was like you could count them on one hand. There's Boulder and Austin and Seattle and Portland, and it was like this sort of hipster, community of progressive cities. Well, that wasn't going to get the job done, and now we're seeing cities like New York and others that are just springboarding ahead of, maybe some of the early adopter cities like Portland, pouring billions of dollars into bikes, into pedestrian improvements, microgrids, rebuilding neighborhoods, affordable housing, mixed use. There's so much going on the policy and investment front, led by folks at the political level who were, in essence, guided by the spiritual leaders like Jane Jacobs, who really gave life to the modern community organizing movement, where she really helped stand in front of Robert Moses and other powerful interests in cities and say, you know what, we really want our neighborhoods to be intact. They might be messy, they might not look like places that real estate developers and urban developers think are important, but this is where we live, and they're vital and they're vibrant. And if you think of the arc of Jane Jacobs standing out and trying to save Penn Station and save East Village, to those now, as we talked about yesterday, in the shareable communities, using technology to bind us together in new ways. It's a crazy evolution of using sort of typical or more old school organizing tactics to come together and organize around issues to today, when we're using all kinds of new tools to connect one another, not just as activists trying to save a place, but actually as entrepreneurs, civic entrepreneurs who are giving life to a place, and in the process, inviting a lot of people into the conversation. I just want to end with, in practical terms, what are we doing? Again, we're a small nonprofit. We're a $1 million organization. I mean, that's so small, to even think that we could talk in sort of ambitious terms about changing our cities one neighborhood at a time, building a brand that's inclusive and starts to knit together the very sectors and the very folks who work in cities and neighborhoods. So you think about the disorganized and sort of somewhat ragged nature of neighborhoods, schools, social service providers, infrastructure providers, real estate interests, city agencies. If you start to peel away a neighborhood and start to try to understand how we can have impact, it's a messy, complicated place. But actually, once you start getting into the work, you recognize you can pinpoint those companies and public sector and nonprofit organizations that are making very specific investments in a neighborhood, and they become our champions to do this work. They become, in essence, our eco-district practitioners who are going to execute. So for us, we're going to do some very practical things in the next 2 years. First, we're going to develop what we hope becomes a gold standard for sustainable development and process management platform to help teams like you all do work and to knit these disparate sectors together in common purpose around targets and indicators that they all can get behind. It's a collective impact approach to the work. It's a really powerful way, we think, to contribute to taking all those disparate investments, and we heard about this in Dorchester, and try to make sense of them and to create something that is greater than the sum of all the parts. So this is about governance, it's about leadership coming together and figuring out how to have the same conversations and translate some of the language that we all speak in our sectors around common things that we care about. So we're going to work very hard with all of you in the next 2 years to build this standard. So Adam, who we plucked from the Australia Green Building Council, and 15 years in industry, is going to help lead this effort, and we really invite you all to be part of it. Now, how we're going to do that is we're going to have an 8-city pilot program. So we, over the next 2 years, are inviting exemplar projects from around the country to come with us and be part of what we're calling target cities. This is, in essence, a way for us to dig deeply into how do we get eco-districts done on the ground. And we've got great projects that we're talking with Kendall Square here in Boston, of course the Innovation District. We've been working with Lucia Athens in Austin and their Seahome District. There is tremendous amounts of Capitol Hill in Seattle, Central District, Mission Rock in San Francisco. I mean, there is so much neighborhood work and revitalization going on in this country, both in existing neighborhoods and in new brown and greenfield sites. Our job is to find 8 exemplar projects that represent the diversity of communities in this country and the diversity of challenges and work with them. From that, we will also inform our framework that then we hope becomes something that the market can use to help scale this work up. And finally, because we're a nonprofit whose mission is to accelerate district scale sustainability, we're going to help train the next generation of leaders in this space. We're developing a training program. We've already trained 18 project teams around the country in the last 18 months. We bring them to, in this case, we brought them to Portland. We work with these project teams, and they're from diverse cities like Cleveland, Charlotte, North Carolina, Charleston, Austin, San Francisco, Denver, you know. So we've had a really interesting 18 months of getting to know these projects, and we're going to do more. We'd like to train thousands, ultimately thousands, and build an army of faculty who are going to train those thousands so that we get good at this work. And as we heard about it yesterday, this work is not so much about the shiny objects of sustainability. That's important. Many of us do that work. Many of us are in that investment space. But it's really how you get the projects done. It's the governance, it's the leadership. And then finally, we're going to work on public policy, advocacy, and research. We're going to hold a research symposium tomorrow with Northeastern, MIT, BU. We're really interested in these key questions that industry has, that the cities have about how to execute on eco-districts. And obviously, there's a public policy agenda here for cities, because this is not about just unleashing the market in these neighborhoods or just unleashing the community developers to do their work. It's a very complicated effort of public-private partnership, and the policy levers that cities have are quite powerful, both to create financial incentives, regulations, and ultimately support mechanisms for this work. So with that, I'm really pleased to transition. Thank you very much for being